Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to WxLive webinar number 133. Today is Friday, December the 12th, 2014, and we have another installment of Uncle Pete's Corner, and this week he's going to be discussing WinDev Dashboards. So it's all yours, Pete.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Exciting, the inaugural issue of the new Google Plus Hangout features and so forth. What we're looking at today are WinDev Dashboards, which is a new feature that was added with version 19. I know a few folks out there have played with them. I didn't play with them for a long time. In fact, I actually didn't look at them until I was getting ready to do my presentation for Devcon, which this was example we're looking at today was actually put together originally for Devcon. It's just another example of why you should attend Devcon, because the folks that did have had all of the sample code and information that you're getting today. They've already had it for 6 weeks. So, you know, that's the value of going to Devcon, is you get access to this kind of information. But when I did start looking at them, I found out very quickly that they're just not as hard as you would have expect them to be. In fact, if you've worked with internal windows in WinDev before, then they become very easy, because really all the dashboard is a grid control of internal window controls that has some extra features, lets the user resize each size of the widget and so forth. But all your widgets are really just internal windows. So if you've been working with internal windows, creating dashboards is super easy. So as you see here, we've got an example dashboard up. This is the example I put together, and this thing is meant to be more inspirational than technical, because really once we get into this, you're going to see that using and creating dashboards is not very technically difficult. So you know, I'm going to show you a little bit of code that it does take. But it's more about maybe inspiring you some different ideas of what you can do with your to incorporate a dashboard into your app. So you know, I've just got some different examples of some different widgets that we can look at. So as you see, this is the dashboard. We've just got in its current configuration here, we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different widgets, but we could resize these widgets, add widgets, take widgets away. Those are all end-user features and functionality that we'll look at as we go through this thing. For example, we can if we go into edit mode and hide that one, then we're able to resize the recent activity to be twice as tall. We could hide that one, and we could actually make the in-out board twice as wide. So those are the types of things that make it an actual widget. And as you see, I got to resize that one up. And there's very little code doing this. Most of this is just built into the dashboard control. That's the really nice thing about it. So that's a general look at it. Now we'll jump over to the IDE and start taking a look at it. So
Pete, just
yes,
a moment, please. I forgot to mention when we started that for those of you that are watching live right now, if you'd like to ask a question, please make sure that your Q&A app is up and active, and then ask a question, and we'll do our best to answer it. Sorry, back to you, Pete.
I have a question. How many more times are you going to interrupt my train of thought? No. So here we are in the IDE. This is my dashboard window. And like I said, as you see, the dashboard control is really just a grid of internal windows. Each of these is an internal window. They're called widgets inside the dashboard control, but really they're just internal windows. So as you see in my default configuration here, I've got room for 5 across and 2 down. And if we go into the settings, on the detailed tabs is where most of the settings are for how you configure and set up your widgets. Start with, you have 3 different formats for how your widgets are handled when the window gets resized. You can set your widgets so that they vary in width. So as your screen size gets bigger, your widget's actually automatically stretched out. You can also set it to, as your screen size gets bigger, more widgets become available. That's the setting that I tend to use. That's the one that tends to make sense to me. And then the final option is your widgets are a fixed size and a fixed number of widgets. So as your screen size changes, it just gets filled in with white space. I guess if you've got a dashboard that has very specific widgets on it that they don't have a lot of changes as far as end user configuration, that might make sense. The next set of settings is the size of each box. That's the cells. And as you see, I've got them set as 250 by 250. And then the spacing between each widget, which I've got 10 pixels vertically and 10 pixels horizontally for my spacing. That means that each widget uses 250 by 250. But as you saw, you can resize a widget and make it taller or wider. Now, because my widgets are 250 by 250, that means as you resize them multiples of that. So for me to make a widget taller, it has to be 500 tall or 500 wide, because it has to be a multiple of whatever widget size it is. And for my example, that makes sense because as you've seen on my dashboard, you know, I've got more what you would call traditional dashboard type controls that are big controls with a little bit of information. I'm kind of the Windows Metro Live Tile kind of idea. Now Andy, I've seen his dashboard. He does something a little different. He uses the smallest size available. And the reason he's doing that is because of the information he's displaying. He wants more control over sizing of each individual widget, where, as you see with my example, I don't have as much size control because you're having to use up such a larger space. So Andy, you want to talk a little bit about the whys of your sizing?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, you should be able to hear me. What I display is actual data from the database on a program that we'll provide out there. It's a checkbook program. But you're looking at your bank balances, you're looking at checks and things like this, and you're actually working within the desktop there and being able to rearrange things around. So having your widget sizes or your block sizes on a 10 by 10 square means that I can move it out basically 20 without resizing everything. You don't have that example with you, do you, Pete?
No.
Okay. Let's give a quick look at that. Let me just a second here.
Do I need to stop sharing mine?
Just a minute. Go ahead. Just a minute here. Let me do something here real quick. Get things going. But what the advantage is that if you're going to use it instead of a base display like you have, you take the cell sizes and make them 10 by 10. Okay. And the cell size is 10 by 10 gives you can go as low as 5 by 5, but 10 by 10 seems to work the best. And you make it variable number of widgets. What that does there now is gives you some fine control about placement as well as size. Let Pete go ahead and do this, and you'll see that you got squares are obviously much smaller. Now when he runs his program, what he'll be able to do is actually move the squares around very slightly one direction or another. And the final portion of this, and this is where I kind of got into it because of the way I wanted to display stuff.
Mine's real confused now because of
Okay, well let me open up the checkbook and we'll kind of show it there, okay? Real quick, hang on a second here. I didn't expect to be doing this, so I should always expect to be doing something.
exactly.
I do have to see that there.
All right. Well, while he's getting that ready, we'll continue on. Just the last thing on the detail tab of the dashboard are the modification by user settings, which this is part of what becomes the stuff that the user can do via the AAF menu of the dashboard. You notice in my example, I have all that stuff turned off. I think, Andy, you're using the standard AAF menu in yours, so that'd be something else good to show. My issue with the AAF menu was it was a little unintuitive to the user how to get started. So instead, what I've done is created a settings button on my dashboard that makes it a little more obvious. Here's where you click to modify your dashboard. That's the approach I took. So I turned off all of these AAF features. I turned off allowing the user to make any of these modifications. And then also over on the GUI tab, if you come into the AAF settings, the only two I have there are add and hide, which are the two settings to add widgets and hide widgets, which those only appear when you're in edit mode. So that means that my settings button, and we'll see that code shortly, puts us in edit mode. Once we're in edit mode, then the add and hide pop-up menu is available, but that's the only time it's available. So it's slightly different interface. I think it's a little more intuitive because I have the settings button that, the user sees the setting button and knows what that's for versus just randomly right-clicking to get into the AAF the first time.
Now, and to be honest,
a little bit different.
The only reason I did the AAF is because I didn't do a settings button.
Exactly. So just a different approach. And when Andy shows us our example, his example, we can see how the standard AAF menu works as well. So, are you ready for your example?
Almost there. Almost there. I've got one thing I'm trying to open up here. You caught me in the middle of doing some other stuff.
All right. While he's doing that, the only other tab that affects the widget is the content tab. And this interface is pretty intuitive. You do an add, and it shows you all your internal windows. Notice it doesn't know which of my internal windows are actual dashboard widgets versus just an internal window, because once again, any internal window can be a widget. So I've taken to naming my actual dashboard ones dash whatever. So and this is another difference that you'll see with Andy's, because his are truly internal windows, the same as, you know, his dashboard is actually more of a functional interface into the program than a traditional informational dashboard.
It's what I'm trying to emulate is a lot of the newer functionality that lets people arrange their screens however they wish to fit their needs, to be a little bit more intuitive that way for them. Right. Is what I try to do.
So, so if I wanted to add the quick buttons, I could add it there, and then I tell it what position I want it in, you know, which box, and also how many boxes it uses by default. Like if you saw my actual dashboard, I'm not running now. Let me run it again. The profit by month by default uses up 2 widgets, and the in-outboard uses up 2 widgets the other direction. Now, the reason I'm not using this content tab is the one downside of the content tab is you can't pass parameters to your widgets. And one of my widgets, the sales information chart, actually has a function that says whether we're looking at the day, the quarter, the month. So instead of doing my default configuration via this interface, I leave this blank and then do my initial coding via code, and we'll look at that code shortly. It's very simple code. So there's 2 different ways to set up your default configuration for how your dashboard looks when a user very first opens it. And I guess that's an important thing to remember, is all you're setting up is the default of the dashboard, because the whole point of the dashboard is to let users configure it, move it around, and change it. So, you know, really what you're setting up is the default.
Okay. I can now get after it. Let's see here. I wish to share one of my screens. That would be yep, that one. Okay, and then present to everyone. What you should be looking at is my current screen right here, which will go to the main. Okay. Now, good, shows me. That's cool. Right at the moment, what you're seeing is actual areas that I've already got laid out for the screen. So I have the count area, I have checkbook area, I have some summary data for some graphics, and a calendar area. Everything dealing with the dashboard itself is set up to use a 10 by 10 widget. And then you get the vertical margin and horizontal margin at 10 each too. Now I have set those to 5 to make them a little bit cleaner. I do keep it in permanent edit mode. I don't do the store, and I don't compact it. Compacting will rearrange when you close things, so I don't do that. And I do the save to a profile, so that way you kind of save it how you want it to look by person instead of to the machine. And that means if I walk to a different machine, if I'm in a business and I walk to a different machine and log on as me, well, I'll get my layout versus anybody else's instead of only can be on the same machine that way. once that's done, obviously now, since these are actual data areas, when I run the program and get it operating, what you get now is you get the ability to move these things around minimally however you wish, and I can expand this one if I want to. I can rearrange how I want these to look on the screen however I wish, and make them larger, and it will save those as I go through it. Okay, so now I can pretty much get everything arranged however I want it to be in my workspace, and do pretty well that way. So that's what the 10 by 10 does, is it gives you a little bit more finite arrangement, because if you get over there, you see how it removed back, moved the block completely out of the way. If you're doing larger blocks, you have to keep that in mind, because it will move them, and then all of a sudden you got everything kind of jacked up, you don't know where things are. But this allows you to allow each individual person have their own workspace however they wish, and rearrange their workspace as they wish to view their data, and have some finite control over it. And it will stay this way every time I log in, because we're saving that as well. And that's what it does. So I kind of like it.
Show them the AF menu.
AF menu has it here, which says restore the initial. I have the image deal. I can save as an image. Now, granted, there's a little bit with this. If I save this as an image, basically what I'm doing is saying this is what I want it to look like. Okay, so I can always see. I can look at the image and says, oh, this is what it was originally. I can add a field to it, which I think there's only one that was missing, which is the budget period. And of course, you can do the same thing, getting rid of it. And then restore the initial configuration, which basically moves everything back the way it was. Okay? And that's what that does. And I kind of left it like that. Now, each one of these gears does certain things. I mean, they are the menu items for that section, so I can have different things happening based upon each section that they're going in. That's, instead of having a global menuing up there at the top, I decided to put gears on each of the internal windows to do things within that internal window, is what it does. So I got the budget and the labels here, different things that I want to do is what happens. Okay, and it gives me some definite abilities there to do things. So I've got reports, whatever's supposed to be done for that particular internal window is on the internal window. If we go look at the internal window itself, as an example, that's all it is. So we got the internal window, we got and basically what this is a button with the accessible tab, drawing on the arrow only, actual expand the pop-up menu. So I've done one of those type buttons where it becomes a button with a pop-up menu attached to it for dropping it. Makes it pretty easy to work with. My wife actually uses this program, and she hasn't asked me a whole lot of questions about it, and which is great. That means I don't have to teach her a whole lot, so we're doing pretty good.
I got a question for you. I noticed you don't have the blue boxes. You're in edit mode, but you don't have the blue boxes. Is that a style setting, or you mean the little blue boxes? The blue around all of your widget areas. See, when I run mine, when I go into edit mode, there's a blue box around each widget area.
I am in permanent edit mode. This is the deal, and it kind of works out nicely. I leave it in permanent edit mode. Okay, so it's constantly in edit mode. Right. I don't have to go into edit mode.
And when it's in permanent edit mode, it doesn't have the blue boxes around it?
That's correct. That's correct.
I wonder if there's a way to... The reason I don't do permanent edit mode is it's very easy to accidentally drag stuff around.
You have to hold the mouse down, so I don't see that very often, and I don't see her doing it very often. I mean, Belinda is obviously my greatest tester in the world, and I have not seen that happen. She does it, she seems to be working it well. A lot of it has to deal with what they're doing, what the screen does, and you'll have to kind of go out of that. You can turn off, even though you have permanent edit mode on, you can turn that off, programmatically.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, because the one thing I don't like about the interface is when you're in edit mode, you have these big blue borders around all your widgets.
Now, it is my understanding, and I've looked at this online, because most of the areas that allows you to rearrange your desktop are PHP type programs that are online that, different widgets and stuff like that. Most of those up there are in permanent edit mode. You don't have to flip a switch to drag things around to different areas, different blocks on the screen. So that's the reason why I went that direction, to make it the same. Now, what I could possibly do, or what you may want to do, is that you can always have a lock feature. In your settings, Pete, just put a lock on there, and even though that thing says permanent edit mode, when you come into your screen and you check your settings and it says lock, then you turn it off, and they don't get to move anything around until they unlock it.
Yeah, well, that's more or less what I have now. That's what going in and out of edit mode is. But if you go in and out of edit mode, you get the blue borders, and when I switch back over to showing my screen, I'll show everyone that. So
yeah, feel free to
do so. Done looking at your screen now?
Yeah, we're done. I mean, basically what you got to realize is that, and I want to thank our resident professor for this. He's the one that shoved internal windows down me from the get-go, and without that kind of view of how that works, that it would have been a lot more trouble now.
Yeah.
For this, so
you've already worked with internal windows.
Yeah. Glenn has been great about it.
Dashboards are simple. So,
yeah.
So now, I went in. Oh,
one other thing, Pete. Just got one other thing to. I don't know if you're going to go through it. You're going to go through the refresh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then we'll wait. We'll let you go ahead and go through the refresh. Then we'll talk about that.
All right. So I went ahead and turned on that permanent edit mode like Andy was talking about, and now when I first run my dashboard, you see I'm actually in edit mode. I can resize stuff. Of course, it had to shove that down to resize it. But I don't have those blue boxes or borders. Now, if I do the manual going into edit mode, you see how I have the blue borders around everything. That's what we were talking about. So there's a difference between permanent edit mode and manual edit mode for some reason. I'm going to explore that a little more because I don't like these blue boxes. They irritate me. They make your screen look ugly, I guess. But anyway, that's what we were talking about on the blue boxes when you're in permanent edit mode. Now, see, once I went out of edit mode, now you can't edit those. So it comes up in default edit mode. And like I said, I had fear that somebody would be trying to click on something and instead drag a widget around accidentally or something. So I'll have to experiment with that a little more and see which way I prefer it. So anyway, we were talking about the fact that the content tab, you can configure your widgets there, but because you can't pass parameters to those widgets, I don't use that content tab, and the main reason why is I have this this widget right here. There's actually 5 different versions of that widget that does today, this month, this week, this period, and instead of writing 5 different screens, I just pass a parameter to that screen. Well, via that content tab, there's nowhere for you to pass a parameter when you add a widget. There's nothing that allows you to pass a parameter, so I can't pass a parameter to that widget. So instead, I do all of my initial configuration via code, and the code is very simple code. I add a widget, which there's 2 different things. You're adding a widget, which that tells the dashboard control, this is a widget that's available to you for that add menu. And you noticed it was very intelligent. If we go back over here and we do add, it only shows me the widgets that aren't already on the screen. For instance, if I remove the recent activity, now my add menu includes recent activity.
Hello,
So,
Pete. We have
yes,
a question, Pete. Is now a good time for it?
Sure.
Oh, and by the way, make sure you click present to all, I think, at the top there.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
Okay, this is a question from Chris. Can a splitter be used to resize between the widgets so that one gets larger as the other gets smaller?
No, because the entire dashboard is a single control. So
you can create an internal window that has a splitter that'll do that, obviously.
Right, but the dashboard control itself would not. So what I was saying, for my setup of my dashboard, the dash add widget isn't actually putting the widget on the dashboard anywhere. What it's doing is telling the dashboard control that this widget is available to you. So it's on the add menu at this point. And all I'm doing is telling it, you know, what dashboard I'm making it available to, because theoretically you could have multiple dashboards. The name of the internal window, which is the widget. So this is dash date time. We can go over and look. There's that window. And then the title of it, which that's the title that appears. If we hide it, date and time, that's the title that appears in that widget. So that has that dash add widget told the dashboard, here's a widget that's available to you to add in and out of the dashboard. So that's what all these dash add widgets are. That returns an ID for that widget. And then this next setting, the initial configuration, I'm saying, okay, add that widget at position 1-1, first, first box. Actually, it's better to look at, 1-1. That's first box, XY. So this would be 2-1. This would be, or actually that would be, it'd be 2-1, and this would be, and this box down here would be 1-2. So it's your X and Y coordinates. So I'm saying add that widget at position 1-1, and its size is exactly 1 widget. And now you see all I'm doing is making each of these available and then saying where to show it. And then like the profit by month, let's look at that one. I add profit by month, and then I say go to position 2-1, but notice here I'm saying it's 2 by 1. And the reason why is that profit by month, its default configuration is 2 widgets wide. So I had to tell it, be in box 2.1, but consume 2 boxes wide. And then notice here I'm adding these extra sales gauge widgets, but I'm not adding those to the initial configuration. That's the ones that I told you about. I have multiple versions of that widget based on passing a parameter to it. And that's what this last setting is I'm passing the parameter day, month, quarter, year. That's the part that I can't do via the Content tab. So notice I'm adding these widgets to the dashboard, but not actually displaying them on the dashboard. I'm just making the dashboard aware that those widgets are available to it. And that's the reason why when we first come into our dashboard, they show up on the add menus, because they're actually not displayed by default. So that's how this code here more or less replaces the content code that is, or the content tab of the dashboard. I just did it by code instead. So 2 different paths to get you to the same place. The main reason I use this one is so that I can pass parameters to those widgets. All right, so before I forget, one thing I need to mention is you'll notice when we first run, notice that little toast message pops up there and tells you that the dashboard configuration was restored. That is happening because of this line of code, dash load configuration. The dashboard feature allows you to save and restore the configuration for that user. Well, obviously that toast message is a little silly, and I looked everywhere online trying to figure out how to remove that. In the online help, I asked Jerome about it, and he had to actually get with the developers. And what we found out is when you're in go mode, when you're in test mode, those toast messages pop up when you store and restore the dashboard. When you create an executable, those toast messages don't appear. So don't panic when you get those little blue toast messages popping up when you're testing your app. They'll go away once you create the executable. So that nowhere in the online help does it tell you that. It's I suspect that that's a leftover thing that the developers were testing when they were first testing it, and it just never got removed out of the test mode. All right, so let's talk about saving the configuration. Again, each user can save their configuration, and just like Andy, I want each user to have their own configuration regardless of which machine they go to. Well, how I accomplish that is by the default manager. I store their configuration as part of their defaults. So what I do is I load a configuration, and I'm using the default manager to store that configuration. The whole configuration, when you this dash save configuration, dash load configuration, those are WX commands that load and save the configuration. And that configuration is just a giant string that has all the configuration information in it. So since it is just a giant string that has all that configuration information in it, you can store that off somewhere yourself in your database. I suspect Andy's doing it on user profile record or something like that, I'm using my default manager and storing it as part of the user defaults. Again, what we're accomplishing there is saving out each user so that no matter what machine they go to, when they log in, their dashboard looks the same. So those are two easy commands, dash save configuration and dash load configuration, that let you store that however that dashboard is configured. And the other place you'll see that code is there are some new code invents that that I've got firing for every time you add a widget or delete a widget or move a widget. These, when you do a dashboard, you get these new little events here, and you'll see anytime you're doing that, well, I know you're changing the configuration of that dashboard, so I want to save that configuration off. So all I did was put in my code to save those configurations anytime you change the dashboard. And these just magically appear once you add a dashboard control to your window. Okay, now, like we were discussing, I did mine via, instead of using the default AAF mode, I did a settings button. That's what this button here is. And if we look at that button, it's displaying a pop-up menu, menu-settings. And if we go look at that, it has a refresh all, a go in and out of edit mode, and a restore the default settings. So if we look at the code behind those three, let me close that so it's easier to get to this code. The refresh all it does is a dash display dashboard. That's, you know, we're all probably familiar with doing table controls where we do a table display, comma TA init. That's the equivalent for dashboards. We do a dash display dashboard. And when we get into the actual individual widgets of the dashboard, we'll see that we actually have a new event on the windows where we can actually put some code in to do something whenever it gets refreshed. And we'll look at that shortly.
And that is a way to pass parameters, actually.
Yeah, you can pass, but again, what I'm talking about on passing parameters is you can't do it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm just it's just one of the deals that I ran into when I was doing mine is obviously when you check when you pick an account and you want to show the data to it, how to get that over there with both of the widgets showing, and you use those events to do that, and that's what works out nicely. So cool. When you get there, I'll show you.
All right, so the next is the edit mode, and all I'm doing is popping them in and out of edit mode. So all I'm doing is setting dash mode to allow them to move, resize, and delete. And then I can also put it in no modify mode. So that's the, I could actually set it so that all they can do is move them, all they can do is resize them, all they can do is add them and delete them. So you can control how much editability they have by which of these settings you give them when you put them in dash edit mode. And the opposite of that is no modify, which basically freezes the dashboard. And then the restore default configuration, if you notice back over on my initial code for the window, once I've configured the dashboard, I save that default configuration off. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can load that default configuration if they ever, they just totally screw up their dashboard, just like Andy had on the AAF menu. This is my ability to completely restore that dashboard by restoring that system global default version. But again, that's just a dash load configuration, and this whole thing is just a string. In fact, let's put in a debug right there, and we can probably actually look at that. And if we look at temp buffer, that if you analyze this, you'll see that all that is the name of the window, its positions. So it's exactly all that configuration information. There's no mystery to what the save default and restore default is doing. All it's doing is storing out this exact information that I gave it here. And the same as the user's using it, and we save theirs off, it's just saving whatever their current configuration is. So, you could analyze what this is doing if you needed to put some code in that did something special based on how they had their dashboard configured, because it's very easy to tell. Perhaps there's a particular widget that you want to give them a warning if they haven't displayed that widget. You could analyze this and see whether or not they're displaying that widget. So, that's the nice thing. It's not some kind of binary black box thing. You can see what that is. Okay, so now we can actually look at the actual widgets. So that's pretty much all the code of the dashboard itself. Everything else is just done on the individual widgets. The first one we're going to look at is the date and time. Again, these are internal windows. That's the reason you'll notice they don't have a border or anything. And if we look here, the only code is I've got a timer set up on this one. So the date and time, I want to automatically refresh the date and time. So I set up this automatic timer to run once a minute. This little procedure is going to run, and all it's doing is refreshing those date and times. So this is one way of refreshing a widget. We're going to look at the other way next, but in this one, the widget is refreshing itself every minute. It just runs and refreshes itself. Let me see here. Check my notes. And then the other here is I make the max width and the max height the initial value. The reason I'm doing that is when we run our dashboard, because I'm in when we go into edit mode, notice how this recent activity I can resize, the in-out board I can resize, but the date time, it won't let me resize it. And the reason why it doesn't let me resize it is because I set that the max width and height to the initial value. So since I made this window 250 by 250, which is the size of each of my widgets, and then I set its maximum value to that same setting, this window can't be made any bigger than 250 by 250, therefore it can't be resized. So, you know, it makes no sense for that user to resize this widget. So that's how I block them from resizing this widget. So that's another little tip for you. Okay, the next widget we're going to look at is current weather conditions. And if you thought we were going to get some exciting code here that was going out and talking to weather.com or something, you're going to be sadly mistaken. Again, this is for informational purposes, you know, and inspiration, not for really technical information. So all I'm doing is randomly deciding what the weather is. The biggest thing to notice is with the weather one, we have this refresh button where we can hit it and I got to get out of it. We can refresh the weather. Yeah, say we're 63 and cloudy. So you just keep clicking this until you get weather you like. Great feature. So that refresh button refreshes that widget by running refresh conditions, which is my low code that randomly decides the conditions. But we also can do a refresh all from here, and notice that also refreshed this. And that's that other setting that we're talking about. Is remember this button over here, refresh all it's doing is a dash display dashboard. Well, whenever a dash display dashboard is fired, this new embed here, refreshing the widget, becomes available to us on each internal window, and whatever code we put in here runs whenever you do a dash display. So that is how, from the dashboard, we can refresh all of our individual widgets, because anytime the dashboard gets refreshed, it's going to fire this event in each of our widgets so we can put code in this widget.
Yeah, and that's where things kind of get a little cool, because in the code that I have there for running it as a desktop, I will have it look at the variables on the other side there and determine what should be displayed. Let me show you. I'm gonna okay. Okay. I'm going to flip back over to me for just a second here, Pete, show them that, okay?
Yep.
Okay. What you're looking at now is the refresh window of the transaction screen is what we're doing, okay? One of the things that I do on this, if we look at the, as an example, if you look at the account screen, is each one of the accounts gets assigned to an account record. Now, an account record is a class record, okay? I use classes and arrays as Pete does, and we've taken it to a pretty good level of sophistication so far, but and I'm sure we got a long ways to go. But the account record now is, in essence, it's global. It's the entire account that I'm working for, so it's global. Well, when I do the dash display here, underneath the accounts or underneath the transaction, the dash display all it does is refresh window. Refresh window interrogates, says, wait a minute, if my current account is not equal to that account, then go ahead, let's redisplay everything accordingly and rebuild the screen. So now when I click on a different account on the side over there, I automatically get a refresh of the other tab, and I don't have to pass any parameters doing so. Okay? I don't have to have a lot of global variables either. Okay? In essence, I know I'm working with that account. Now, where that comes from is not only this as an account, but I have other programs dealing with other things that I want to know what record I'm working with, even when I'm on other screens as a global method. You could do it in like patients. You can do it in what we do on printing, where we have a job number. We basically are using across the board in the printing. Things like this, and since this, and this is where, since it posts that event, and you can trap that event, two things happens. One is I don't have to put an event in there to try to trap it. I don't have to determine whether that window's open and pass the parameter to it. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is do this, and if the window is active on that dashboard, it works. So that really makes it nice and clean, and makes it very easy to deal with. But again, a lot of it has to deal with is you have the global record, and you make sure that that you're filtering accordingly on the refresh or init, or however you want to do it, and it works out nicely. Pete.
All right. So the one point that need to make so that you understand that, again, that embed that we're talking about, you have to expose it, and we have default embeds when we first come into an internal window and go to code. We see the global, we see the init, the closing, whenever modifying. The one that we don't normally see is the refreshing the widget. To get that one, that's one of the, I think they call these optional embed points or something. There's several different ones, like you mouse double click and so forth. The one that we want is the third icon over, refreshing the dash widget. When we click on that, now we get this new embed point available to us, where we can put code in there that fires whenever the dashboard is refreshed. So when you to first get that embed point available to you, that's how you get there. The only other thing on this window, and this is, Andy showed you on his widgets, he had a setting. Some of my widgets have a setting option, like for the weather one, you can switch between Fahrenheit and Celsius. So that's a button that's functional on the window. So it's no new code to you. It's just when you add that into a dashboard and so forth, it kind of expands its functionality somewhat.
Yeah, and I did steal it from Pete on that one. I'll guarantee you I did do that.
Yeah, he steals everything from me.
Not everything.
All right, so that's now we'll look at something that is very traditional for a dashboard is this graph. Really, there's not a lot of code there at all. Again, this is mainly for inspirational purposes. I'm trying to figure out which one that is. That's trending. All this code is just randomizing my chart. We're not going to go over that today. We're not about the chart. The only real thing to note about this is my window is 500 by 250, because remember, this widget by default takes up 2 spaces wide. And notice my max width and my max height here, they're not set to the initial value. So I could come in and go into edit mode here and actually shrink that down, or I can even make it 3 wide. So that's the difference in whether I set that initial height setting or not, is it allows how that gets resized or not. All right, the other one is, just another idea of something that you might do with your dashboard. The old QuickBooks quick launch buttons concept. It's just some buttons to get the user into particular parts of the program, and maybe you would expand this and make it where the user can configure which buttons are on their quick launch bar. If we look at the code for those, again, nothing earth-shattering is going to be behind this code. All I'm doing is I'm actually pressing buttons off of my ribbon bar. That's one of the powers of WinDev, is instead of having to duplicate the code that's behind that customer button of my ribbon bar, most development environments, I'd wind up duplicating that code or moving that code off into a procedure and calling it from 2 places. Well, instead, I'm able to just execute that button and accomplish it that way. So that's nothing to do with dashboards, but something to remember how, some of the power that WinDev gives us. All right, so now we'll move on to the in-out board, which is this one here. Just like the trending one was double width, the in-out board starts out as double height, but it can be resized wider. And there is a little bit of code on it. Dash in-out board. And again, this isn't dashboard code, so we're not going to go over it in any kind of a complicated process, but you'll notice I'm showing the folks that are out in red, and there is a little bit of code in here that shows you that. And then this is another one that I'm using that refresh procedure, so when the dashboard refreshes, your in-out board refreshes. So if we do a refresh all, we'll notice that the people that are in or out change. The other thing that's not necessarily a dashboard feature, but worth noting in this code that you might want to study for your own code somewhere else, is I remember how you have the dashboard sorted. So that, because I'm rebuilding that dashboard when you refresh it, but I want to restore the sort order to the way you did. So what that's about is, if I sort this by status, now all my ins and outs are at the top. Normally, when you do a refresh all, we'd go back to the default sort order of that table because we're doing a completely rebuilding that table. Well, by me remembering what column that table was sorted on before, after I do my table display TA init, I can resort it on that column and get them back to the sort order that they were on before they before I refresh the table. So again, not necessarily dashboard code, but a little bit of code that might be of use to you. The sales funnel, again, there's nothing fancy here except I'm randomly building that chart, so nothing elaborate there. And this is another one that gets refreshed whenever the dashboard's refreshed. And then the recent activity, if we look at it, the only fancy stuff here, and again, it's not necessarily dashboard code, but of use to you, is the looper adjust based on the size of the widget. And I'm looking for where I'm actually doing that. Yeah, right here, I'm figuring out how many rows of that looper will fit on the widget. And what I'm doing is this recent activity, if we stretch this one down, go back to edit mode, stretch this down, we can well, I don't have enough in here to do it. If we had more in here, it would now know that it needs to add additional entries into the, oh, okay, there we go. Now we've got enough in there. See, it knows that, oh, that looper needs to show additional rows. So how I did that was I figure out how tall my widget is, and then I know how much room each row of that looper is. So I use that information to decide how many rows to add to my looper so that my looper doesn't expand past the widget. So, that means that, if the user wants to see 15 recent activity line items, they stretch their widget out and they'll see 15. But if they make it shorter, they'll only see 5. And then, of course, the cool thing about these are, and again, this is for informational reasons, is, the idea behind the recent activity widget is you should be able to click on this and it should take you actually to that quote window. So this is a feature I really like to add to my apps. As a user's working, they spend a lot of their time going back to stuff that they just got done with. They just added a new customer. They just added an invoice. So those things that they've just done, it's very quick and easy for them to jump back into that invoice, jump over to that appointment that they just added, that sort of thing. Another concept for this, very similar, is a to-do list of these are the things coming up, with those links that jump you over to those other parts of your app. So a good thing to do with the dashboard. Then the very last widget we're going to look at, there's actually 4 widgets, and let me reconfigure our dashboard real quick so that we can let me get rid of all these breakpoints so that we. All right, so let's hide this and hide this one, and now let's add all these different sales gauges.
Hey Pete, we have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, this question is from Wolfgang. Why did you just not use table count, table product? I don't know if you see that yourself or not.
The table count stuff, a lot of that stuff does not work on loopers in WinDev. It works in WebDev, not in WinDev. I'm not real sure on the looper count. the table count one, but what I was doing was I needed to know how many random records to generate. So I had to figure out how much I could fill so that I could generate those records.
Thank you for the question, Wolfgang, and thank you for the answer, Pete.
All right, so as you see here, we've got 5 different gauges on our dashboard now. Well, I'm not going to write 5 different windows. You know, this is the exact same window, and this is what I was talking about with the parameter. So now if we look at dash sales gauge, it has a parameter that comes in, and by default it's day. And that was why, that was the whole reason on our dashboard code that when we added those widgets, we passed the parameter day, month, quarter, and year. So that builds these different dashboards. So each dashboard, you know, we've got 5 different widgets, but only one, or 4 different widgets, but only one window that generates all 4 of those widgets. So that was the whole reason that I hand-coded my initial content, is so that I could pass that parameter so that I could add 4 widgets to my dashboard for these 4 different gauges. Then again, not necessarily dashboard tricks, but you'll notice my gauge has 2 needles on it. That's a trick I use a lot. I use it to show, you know, like here I'm using it to show comparison of last year versus this year. The other way that I use that double needle trick a lot of times is to show current value and max value. Like, you know, what are the sales today? What's the highest sales we've ever had for a single day? Those type of things. How I'm doing that is I've actually got 2 chart controls on this window, and I stack them on top of each other so that I can get a needle, the 2 different needles displaying. The other bit of code in here is you'll notice that I only refresh if you're in day mode. So only the day widget automatically refreshes when the dashboard refreshes. In other words, this year versus last year, I'm not going to go through all the code to refresh that every time the dashboard refreshes, if the dashboard's refreshing every 5 minutes, because your yearly values aren't going to change enough to make a difference. So it's only the daily values that I want to do that refresh. The other trick I used is, you notice that the center of my gauge has a thumbs up, thumbs down, and if we refresh this day one enough times, we'll get into a, oh, it's weird, I'm not getting, let me hide that. There we go. Now, you notice when I got, if my today is greater than yesterday, I'm getting a thumbs up. If today is less than yesterday, I'm getting a thumbs down. That I'm doing that again, you know, just using a little trick of, if we look at that window, I've got an image just superimposed over my chart or my gauge, and then I've got my thumbs up and thumbs down images, and then in my code, I display either thumbs up or thumbs down based on whether it's higher or lower. So again, no earth-shattering code, but just a little tip, trick, whatever you want to call it, that, you know, might be of use to you, might not be of use to you. You know, you paid the same whether you use that tip or not. All right, so that's pretty much it for the dashboard. I'll make this project available. That'll be posted over on Google Plus so that you can download this project. It's actually part of my open source, so you'll get all my open source stuff. But it'll allow you to play with this dashboard. Hopefully, it'll inspire you to add a dashboard to your app. There are a few things coming. Version 20. Supposedly, we are going to have dashboards for WebDev. And trust me, I will be on the absolute bleeding edge of that charge. The day I can move to 20 and start playing with a WebDev dashboard, I will. So as soon as we get 20 in our hands and start playing with it, I'll be sure to update you on that. From what I've seen, it really looks like it's almost the exact same commands and functions as what we're doing now. I suspect it's using internal pages instead of internal windows, obviously, but I'm also hoping a side effect of that is that internal pages become a little more powerful, because that's kind of one of the downsides of WebDev currently, is internal pages are nowhere near as functional as internal windows are. You can't change them dynamically on the fly like you can internal windows. So I'm hoping a side effect of the dashboard stuff for WebDev is that internal pages themselves become a little more powerful.
Okay. Looks like Wolfgang has another question. This is back to his previous question. Why didn't you use table count, and then in parentheses he puts table underscore product comma to visible parentheses? Don't know whether you can see that or not.
No, I don't have that window where I can see that, but we can go back over there.
Yeah, table count parentheses table underscore product comma to visible parentheses.
I really don't know what he's talking about, but again, this was just some sample code I put. It may not be the best way to do. This was not about technical stuff of loopers and that kind of thing. So I was just throwing some different examples and stuff together. So I'm not sure exactly what he's asking about, but there's nothing. That there may be better ways to figure out that looper height. I don't know what he's got on the to visible. I don't see that at all. So I'm not really sure what he's asking.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. Did you have anything else, Pete?
No, that pretty much takes care of it. Like I said, hopefully, between my examples and Andy's, we've inspired you to go out and add a dashboard to your app, and it's definitely one of those newer, sexier features that will help sell your app.
Well, I want to post the checkbook example as a link on this webinar afterwards as well. So if you don't have it from the Devcon, you can get it from here.
And Wolfgang has a follow-up question or comment. That is for the total display row for the activity loop. So if you want, we can continue that discussion on the Google Plus community.
Yeah.
Do you think that'd be good?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I appreciate
This has been great.
Yeah, it's been really good. We had we had a good number of viewers. I was watching the dashboard during the entire webinar, and most of the streams were getting a high def stream. Some were getting 240 and 360, but the majority were getting a high def stream, which is really good. And this video will be available on YouTube, I would say, within the hour. We're
YouTubing it now, dudes.
Yeah.
We're in the big time.
My blog post, I haven't completed the article that goes along with this, but as normal, I always do a blog post that goes with my webinars. So that gives you, you can watch the video and read the blog post. So it gives you two different ways to gather the information out. And as soon as that blog post is available, that'll be posted over on the Google Plus community too. And I hope the one thing that we've done today is get you understanding the power of the Google Plus. Like Andy was saying, it automatically rang him this morning and said the webinar is about to start. And there are some cool things that this does for us. And I think another nice thing is they pop up on YouTube much quicker because you don't have to go through that extra conversion step that Arnold had to do with the other stuff.
The flipping back and forth between presentations from one to another was a lot cleaner too than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal. So I guess that's it, everybody. And Andy, you get the last word.
Y'all be good or be good at it. That's all I